The candle on the long wooden table trembled as Elena Voss stood in front of the entire pack council, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her own ears. Every eye in the hall was fixed on her, and none of them held warmth. Just moments ago, she had been called forward to receive praise for settling a border dispute without a single drop of blood spilled. Instead, she was being told to hand over the silver pendant that marked her as Luna of the Ashwood Pack. "Damien, what is this?" Elena asked, her voice steady, even though her hands were shaking. She looked at the man she had stood beside for 5 years, the man she had once trusted with everything. Alpha Damien did not meet her eyes. He stared at a spot somewhere above her shoulder, his jaw tight. "The council has decided," he said, though everyone in the room knew the council had decided nothing without his approval. "Priscilla will take over as Luna, effective tonight." A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Priscilla, seated near the front in a pale blue dress that looked far too delicate for pack gatherings, pressed a hand to her chest as if she herself were surprised by the announcement. But Elena caught the tiny flicker at the corner of Priscilla's mouth, a twitch that most people would have missed. Elena did not miss it. She had spent years reading the subtle signs of deception in negotiations with rival packs, and she recognized triumph disguised as shock when she saw it. 5 years, Elena said quietly. 5 years I have led patrols, negotiated treaties, and kept this pack safe while you were away settling disputes in the north. 5 years, Damien, and you are replacing me because of her? It is not about replacing you, Damien said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Priscilla has told me things, difficult things, about how you have treated her since she arrived. Elena's stomach dropped. She turned to look at Priscilla, who now had tears welling in her eyes. Tears that seemed to appear on command. "What things?" Elena asked, her voice sharper now. "I have barely spoken 2 words to this woman since she came to our territory 3 months ago." "She says you called her weak," Damien continued, his voice rising to match the murmurs spreading through the hall. "She says you told the other wolves not to trust her because she was not born a shifter. She says you threatened her." Every word felt like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples of disbelief through Elena's chest. She had never said any of those things. She barely interacted with Priscilla at all, aside from the occasional polite greeting in the pack dining hall. But looking around the room, she saw something worse than disbelief on the faces of the pack members. She saw uncertainty. They did not know who to believe, and in that uncertainty, Damien's decision would stand unchallenged. "I never said those words," Elena said, forcing herself to remain calm. "Ask anyone who was present. Ask the guards who walk the halls at night. Ask your own sister, who has seen me interact with Priscilla more than anyone else in this pack." Damien's sister, Wren, sat near the back of the hall, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. She did not speak up, though Elena could see the conflict in her eyes. Wren had always been careful, always cautious about inserting herself into matters between her brother and his mate. Even now, with everything on the line, she remained silent. "The decision has already been made," Damien said, his voice final. "You will hand over the pendant." Elena's fingers moved to the silver chain around her neck, the one that had marked her as Luna since the day she and Damien were bonded. It was more than jewelry. It was a symbol of trust, of authority, of the years she had spent protecting a pack that now stood watching her be stripped of everything she had built. Slowly, she unclasped it and let it fall into Damien's outstretched palm. "You are making a mistake," she said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "One day you will understand exactly how big a mistake this is." Priscilla rose from her seat and crossed the room, moving with a grace that seemed almost rehearsed. She took the pendant from Damien's hand and fastened it around her own neck, her fingers lingering on the silver, as if she wanted everyone to see the transfer of power complete itself in front of their eyes. "Thank you, Damien," she said softly. "I promise I will honor this pack the way it deserves." Elena watched the exchange with a strange, cold clarity. She noticed the way Priscilla's eyes flicked toward her for just a fraction of a second, a look that held none of the fragility she displayed for everyone else in the room. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced again by wide, innocent eyes and trembling lips. But Elena had seen it. She knew what she saw. "This meeting is finished," Damien announced, turning away from Elena, as if she were no longer worth his attention. "Return to your duties." The pack members began to disperse, some casting sympathetic glances toward Elena, others avoiding her gaze entirely, too afraid of drawing Damien's displeasure by showing any support for the woman he had just publicly humiliated. Elena stood alone in the center of the hall long after most had left, staring at the empty space where the pendant used to rest against her chest. She thought back to the early days of her bond with Damien, when he had looked at her with respect, even admiration. She had helped him secure territory during a dispute with the Ironclaw pack. She had negotiated a peace treaty that prevented a war that would have cost dozens of lives. She had trained new warriors, mentored young wolves who had nowhere else to turn, and kept the pack's finances stable during a difficult winter when food was scarce. None of that seemed to matter now. As she finally turned to leave the hall, she noticed Ren standing near the doorway, waiting for her. "Elena," Ren said quietly, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one else was listening. "I do not believe what she said about you. I have watched you for years. You are not cruel." "Then why did you stay silent?" Elena asked, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. Ren's expression tightened. "Because my brother does not listen to anyone right now except her. If I speak against Priscilla, he will see it as betrayal. I need to find another way to help you, Elena. A way that will not make things worse." Elena appreciated the sentiment, but it did little to ease the ache in her chest. She had spent years earning the loyalty of this pack, and in a single evening, that loyalty had crumbled into fearful silence. She walked out of the hall and into the cool night air, the moon hanging low and heavy above the tree line. For the first time in years, she felt truly alone. Over the following days, Elena watched as Priscilla settled into her new role with unsettling ease. She wore the Luna pendant everywhere, made a show of attending council meetings, and issued instructions to pack members in a soft, delicate voice that always seemed to carry an undertone of fragility. Whenever Damien was present, Priscilla would falter slightly, lean on him for support, or dab at her eyes, as though the responsibilities of her new position were simply too much for her to bear. Yet the moment Damien left the room, her posture would straighten, her voice would sharpen, and she would issue commands with a confidence that did not match the delicate persona she performed so well. Elena noticed these shifts because she made a point of observing carefully, even as she was pushed further and further to the margins of pack life. She was reassigned from her position overseeing border patrols to organizing supply inventories in the storage sheds, a task typically given to younger wolves still learning the basics of pack responsibility. It was a clear message, one that everyone in the pack understood without needing it spoken aloud. Elena had fallen from grace, and anyone who wished to remain in Damien's good graces would do well to distance themselves from her. Despite the isolation, Elena refused to let herself become bitter or careless. She continued her work in the storage sheds with the same diligence she had brought to every task in her years as Luna, organizing supplies with careful precision, ensuring nothing went to waste. It was during one of these long afternoons, sorting through crates of preserved food, that she overheard two young pack members whispering near the entrance of the shed. "Did you see how fast her arm healed?" one of them murmured. She said she twisted it, falling down the stairs, but the swelling was gone by the next morning. "My cousin broke his leg last winter, and it took him 3 weeks to heal, even with our natural strength." "Maybe she just heals fast," the other replied, though there was doubt in his tone. "She says she used to be human before Damien marked her. Maybe the change gave her stronger healing." Elena's ears perked up at the conversation, though she kept her attention fixed on the crate in front of her, careful not to let the young wolves know she was listening. A human-turned shifter could indeed develop enhanced healing after being marked by an alpha, but the speed described by the pack member sounded far too fast, even for someone freshly transformed. It usually took months, sometimes longer, for a newly turned wolf's body to fully adjust to the enhanced abilities that came with the change. Priscilla had arrived at the pack only 3 months ago, according to the story Damien had told everyone. If her healing was already matching that of wolves born into their abilities, something did not add up. Elena filed the information away carefully, unwilling to draw attention to her suspicions until she had more evidence. She had learned long ago that accusations without proof were worse than useless in a pack as politically delicate as Ashwood. She needed facts, not whispers, if she hoped to ever challenge the story Priscilla had spun so carefully around herself. That evening, as Elena walked back to her small quarters at the edge of the pack grounds, a modest cottage she had been moved into after losing her position in the main lodge, she noticed a figure standing near the tree line, watching the pack grounds with quiet interest. The stranger wore dark clothing that blended into the shadows of the forest, and even from a distance, Elena could sense the raw power radiating from him. He was not a member of Ashwood Pack. She would have recognized every scent within their territory. She paused, her instincts sharpening as she assessed the potential threat. The stranger did not move aggressively, nor did he attempt to hide his presence once he noticed her watching him. Instead, he simply inclined his head slightly, a gesture that felt more like acknowledgement than challenge, before turning and disappearing into the trees. Elena stood frozen for a long moment, her mind racing through possibilities. Rival packs did not typically send scouts so openly, especially not ones who allowed themselves to be seen so easily. Something about the encounter felt deliberate, as if the stranger wanted her to notice him, wanted her to remember his presence. She filed this encounter away as well, alongside the whispers about Priscilla's suspiciously fast healing, uncertain how the pieces might fit together but sensing, deep in her bones, that they somehow would. That night, sleep did not come easily. Elena lay awake in her small cottage, staring at the wooden beams of the ceiling, replaying the events of the past week over and over in her mind. She thought about the years she had given to this pack, the trust she had built, the sacrifices she had made. She thought about Damien's cold refusal to even consider her side of the story, and Priscilla's carefully crafted performance of fragility that had fooled an entire pack council. Most of all, she thought about the stranger in the trees, and the strange feeling that his appearance was not a coincidence. The following morning, Elena rose before dawn, as she always did, and made her way to the storage sheds to begin her assigned duties. The pack grounds were quiet at this hour, the only sounds coming from birds beginning to stir in the trees, and the distant rush of the river that ran along the eastern border of the territory. She found comfort in the silence, a rare moment of peace in what had become an increasingly chaotic existence. As she worked, sorting through crates and taking inventory of the pack's remaining winter supplies, she allowed her mind to wander back through the years she had spent building Ashwood into a strong, respected pack. She remembered negotiating with the Ironclaw pack after a border dispute threatened to erupt into open conflict, using careful diplomacy to secure peace, without a single wolf losing their life. She remembered training young warriors who had come to the pack with nothing, teaching them not just how to fight, but how to lead with honor and fairness. She remembered the quiet nights spent reviewing treaties and trade agreements with Damien by candlelight, the two of them working as true partners, equals in every sense of the word. That partnership felt like a distant memory now, replaced by a man who would not even look her in the eye, who had believed the fabricated words of a stranger over the proven loyalty of a mate who had stood beside him for half a decade. Elena felt the sting of betrayal deepen with each passing hour, but beneath the hurt, something else began to stir, a quiet, steady resolve. She would not simply accept this fate. She would find the truth about Priscilla, no matter how long it took, no matter how isolated she became in the process. She owed it to herself, and to the pack she had sacrificed so much to protect, to uncover exactly what was happening beneath the surface of Priscilla's carefully constructed fragility. As the sun rose higher over the tree line, casting warm light across the pack grounds, Elena finished her inventory of the storage sheds and stepped outside to stretch her tired muscles. It was then that she noticed Wren approaching, her expression tense, glancing repeatedly over her shoulder, as though checking to make sure no one followed her. "Elena," Wren said quietly, keeping her voice low even though no one else was nearby. "I need to tell you something, but you cannot repeat where you heard it." Elena straightened, sensing the urgency in Wren's tone. "What is it?" "Last night, I saw Priscilla meeting with someone near the eastern border," Wren whispered. "A man I did not recognize. They spoke for only a few minutes, but the way she carried herself with him was completely different from how she acts around Damien, cold, calculated, almost like she was giving him instructions." Elena's pulse quickened. The eastern border was close to where she had seen the stranger the night before. Did you get a good look at him? Could you identify his scent? Ren shook her head. I stayed too far back to risk being noticed. But Elena, something is very wrong here. I think you might be right about her. Elena placed a reassuring hand on Ren's shoulder, grateful for even this small crack in the wall of silence that had surrounded her since the council meeting. Thank you for telling me. We need to be careful, Ren. If Priscilla suspects we are watching her, she may become more dangerous, not less. Ren nodded, though worry remained etched across her features. What are you going to do? Elena looked toward the eastern tree line, where the morning mist still clung to the base of the trees, hiding secrets she was determined to uncover. I am going to find out exactly who Priscilla really is, she said. And when I do, Damien will have no choice but to see the truth, whether he wants to or not. As the two women parted ways, Elena felt a renewed sense of purpose settle over her, steadying the storm of emotions that had been raging inside her since the moment Damien stripped her of her title. She had lost her position, her authority, and the trust of the mate she had once believed would stand by her through anything, but she had not lost her mind, her instincts, or her determination. Somewhere in the shadows of Ashwood territory, a stranger with unreadable eyes had watched her without explanation, and a woman who claimed to be fragile was meeting secretly with unknown allies near the border. Elena did not yet understand how these pieces connected, but she trusted the instincts that had never failed her in 5 years of leading this pack. The truth was out there, hidden beneath layers of manipulation and carefully performed weakness, and Elena intended to uncover every single layer until nothing remained but the truth itself. For now, she returned to her duties in the storage sheds, playing the part of the quiet, dismissed former Luna that Damien and Priscilla expected her to be. But behind her calm exterior, her mind worked tirelessly, piecing together fragments of information, preparing for the moment when she would finally have enough evidence to expose the truth to an entire pack that had been deceived by a masterful performance of fragility, hiding something far more dangerous underneath. The sun climbed higher over Ashwood territory, and somewhere beyond the eastern border, the stranger who had watched her from the tree line continued his own quiet investigation, unaware that soon, his path and Elena's would cross again, setting into motion events that would change the fate of two packs forever. 3 weeks before the council meeting that changed everything, Priscilla had arrived at Ashwood territory with nothing but a small bag and a story that seemed carefully designed to earn sympathy from anyone who heard it. She claimed to have escaped a cruel pack in the south, one that treated humans as little more than servants, and that she had wandered through the forest for days before collapsing near the northern gate of Ashwood's borders. Damien had been the one to find her, returning from a hunting trip with 2 of his closest guards. According to the story that spread quickly through the pack, he had carried her unconscious body back to the lodge himself, refusing to let anyone else touch her. From that moment forward, Priscilla had positioned herself carefully in his orbit, appearing at meals, offering quiet words of gratitude, and slowly working her way into conversations that had nothing to do with her at all. Elena remembered the early days of Priscilla's arrival, with a strange clarity now, replaying moments she had barely registered as significant at the time. She recalled Priscilla sitting near Damien during pack dinners, always positioned close enough to touch his arm when she laughed at something he said, though her laughter always seemed a beat too late, as though she were performing a reaction rather than feeling one. She recalled the way Priscilla would grow faint during training demonstrations, swaying dramatically until Damien rushed to her side, even though the demonstrations posed no real danger to onlookers standing at a safe distance. At the time, Elena had dismissed these moments as the awkward adjustments of someone new to pack life, unfamiliar with the customs and physical demands of a world she had not been born into. She had even extended kindness toward Priscilla during those early weeks, offering to walk her through basic pack traditions and introducing her to other wolves who might help her settle in. Priscilla had accepted this kindness with wide, grateful eyes, thanking Elena profusely in front of others, always careful to perform gratitude in the most visible way possible. Looking back now, Elena recognized the pattern for what it truly was. Every kindness Elena extended had likely been catalogued, twisted later into evidence of manipulation or cruelty, whenever Priscilla needed a story to tell Damien. The very acts of generosity that should have built trust between them had instead become ammunition in a campaign Elena had not even realized was being waged against her. As the days passed following her demotion, Elena continued her careful observation of Priscilla's behavior, gathering small details that, on their own, seemed insignificant, but together painted a troubling picture. She noticed that Priscilla never ate meat rare, as most shifters preferred, always requesting her food well cooked, a preference more common among humans who had not yet fully adjusted to their wolf's instincts. Yet she also noticed that Priscilla's night vision seemed unnaturally sharp for someone only 3 months into her transformation, catching details in dim lighting that even experienced shifters sometimes missed. These contradictions nagged at Elena's mind as she went about her diminished duties in the storage sheds, and she found herself returning again and again to the conversation she had overheard between the 2 young pack members about Priscilla's suspiciously fast healing. If Priscilla was not simply a newly turned human, if her body responded to injury and darkness in ways that suggested experience rather than adjustment, then the entire story she had told Damien about her origins might be nothing more than an elaborate performance. Elena decided she needed more than whispers and observations to challenge Damien's decision. She needed concrete evidence, something undeniable that could not be dismissed as jealousy or bitterness on her part. The problem was that gathering such evidence required resources and freedom of movement that her diminished status within the pack no longer afforded her. She could not simply demand access to Priscilla's private quarters or question pack members without arousing suspicion that would quickly find its way back to Damien. It was during this period of quiet frustration that Wren approached her again, this time with more troubling information gathered from her own careful observations. "I followed her again last night," Wren admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, as the 2 women stood near the edge of the training grounds, ostensibly discussing nothing more than the weather to any onlooker who might pass by. She met the same man near the eastern border. This time I got close enough to catch a fragment of what they said. Elena's attention sharpened immediately. "What did you hear?" She called him by a name, Garrick, and she said something about the plan moving faster than expected, that Damien was easier to control than they anticipated. Wren's expression was grim as she relayed the information. "Elena, I think this goes far beyond a woman trying to steal a title. I think there is something much bigger happening here, something that could put the entire pack at risk." The weight of Wren's words settled heavily over Elena's shoulders. She had suspected manipulation, perhaps even a scheme to secure resources or status within Ashwood, but the idea that Priscilla's presence might be tied to a larger, more dangerous plot changed the stakes entirely. If Priscilla answered to someone named Garrick, someone actively working to control Damien's decisions from behind the scenes, then Ashwood Pack itself might be in far greater danger than anyone realized. "We need to find out who Garrick is," Elena said, her mind already working through the possibilities. "And we need to do it carefully. If Priscilla suspects we know anything, she will change her methods, cover her tracks even more carefully than she already has." Wren nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "There is something else. I recognized the scent of the man she met, faintly, beneath the cover of pine and earth he was clearly trying to mask himself with. It reminded me of the Thornwood Pack, the one that was driven from their territory 2 years ago, after they attempted to seize land from 3 neighboring packs at once." Elena's blood ran cold at the mention of Thornwood. She remembered the conflict well, though Ashwood had not been directly involved. The Thornwood Pack had attempted an aggressive expansion, using underhanded tactics and broken treaties to seize territory from weaker neighbors, until a coalition of packs finally drove them out entirely, scattering their members and stripping their former alpha of his title. If Priscilla had ties to remnants of that pack, her presence at Ashwood was almost certainly not a coincidence, and her goals likely extended far beyond simply claiming a Luna title for herself. "This changes things," Elena murmured, half to herself. "If Thornwood remnants are involved, they may be looking for a way back into power, using Ashwood as a foothold to rebuild their influence. Damien needs to know this, but he will not listen to me, not without solid proof." "Then we get proof," Wren said firmly, her earlier hesitation giving way to determination. "I am tired of watching my brother be manipulated by someone who does not care about this pack at all. Whatever it takes, Elena, I will help you uncover the truth. Over the following days, Elena and Ren developed a careful, quiet strategy to gather more information without drawing attention to themselves. Ren, still trusted within the pack due to her status as Damien's sister, used her position to monitor Priscilla's movements and conversations, reporting back to Elena during brief, carefully timed meetings away from prying eyes. Elena, meanwhile, focused on gathering information from pack members who had witnessed Priscilla's inconsistent behavior, carefully steering conversations to draw out details without revealing her own suspicions too openly. It was during one such conversation with an elderly pack member named Corwin, who oversaw the pack's healing stores, that Elena uncovered a crucial piece of the puzzle. Corwin had been tending to a minor injury on his hand when Elena visited the healing quarters under the pretense of restocking bandages for the storage sheds. "Strange thing happened last week," Corwin said conversationally, not realizing the significance of what he was about to share. "Priscilla came to me complaining of a deep cut on her palm, said she sliced it while preparing food. I cleaned and wrapped it properly, told her to keep it dry for at least a few days to avoid infection. Came back the very next morning asking for more bandages, and when I unwrapped her hand to check on the wound, there was nothing there, not even a scar. I have tended wounds for 40 years, and I have never seen anything heal that fast, not even in wolves born to this life." Elena kept her expression neutral, though her mind raced with the implications of what she had just heard. "That does sound unusual," she said carefully. "Did you mention this to anyone else?" Corwin shrugged. "I assumed it was simply a strong constitution, perhaps a benefit of being newly marked by an alpha as powerful as Damien. Did not think much more of it until you asked." Elena thanked Corwin for his time and left the healing quarters with her thoughts spinning. A wound that healed completely overnight, with no scarring whatsoever, was not something even experienced shifters typically experienced. It suggested a level of supernatural healing that went far beyond what a newly turned wolf, even one marked by a powerful alpha, should possess. It suggested, instead, that Priscilla had far more experience with her abilities than her carefully constructed story allowed for. That evening, as Elena returned to her small cottage, she found Ren waiting for her near the doorway, an urgent expression on her face. "I have something," Ren said, holding up a small folded piece of parchment. "I found this near the training grounds, dropped near the spot where Priscilla usually meets Garrick. It must have fallen from her pocket." Elena took the parchment carefully, unfolding it to reveal a hastily scrawled message written in unfamiliar handwriting. The words were brief but chilling. "Move faster. The council will not wait forever. Once the pendant is secure, prepare the second phase." "Second phase," Elena repeated, her stomach tightening with dread. "This confirms it. Priscilla's plan extends far beyond simply becoming Luna. There is something larger at work here, something that could put every wolf in this pack in danger." "What do we do?" Ren asked, her voice tight with worry. Elena studied the note carefully, memorizing every detail before folding it back up and tucking it into a hidden pocket sewn into her cloak. "We keep gathering evidence," she said finally, "but we also need outside help. If Thornwood remnants are truly involved, we may not have the resources within Ashwood alone to counter whatever they are planning. We need allies, Ren, ones with the strength and resources to stand against a threat this size." Ren's eyes widened slightly. "You are talking about seeking help from another pack." "I am talking about survival," Elena replied firmly. "If I am right about what Priscilla is planning, Ashwood cannot face this threat alone, especially not with Damien, blinded by whatever hold she has over him. We need someone powerful enough to see the truth clearly, someone who is not already tangled in Priscilla's web of manipulation." As the two women stood together in the fading evening light, Elena's mind drifted, unbidden, to the stranger she had seen near the tree line days earlier, the one who had watched her with quiet, unreadable eyes before disappearing into the forest without a word. She did not know his name or his purpose, but something about his presence had felt significant, deliberate even. Perhaps their paths crossing had not been coincidence after all. Little did Elena know, that very stranger had already begun his own investigation into the strange happenings within Ashwood territory, following threads of information that would soon lead him directly back to her. 3 days after Elena and Ren discovered the hidden note, a gathering of neighboring pack leaders convened at a neutral territory called Hollow Ridge, a tradition held twice each year to discuss trade agreements, border disputes, and matters affecting the wider wolf community. Damien attended these summits as a matter of obligation, though he had grown increasingly distracted in recent months, his attention consumed by matters within his own territory. This year, he brought Priscilla with him, introducing her to other pack leaders as his new Luna, a decision that raised more than a few skeptical eyebrows among the gathered alphas. Elena had not been invited, her diminished status within Ashwood making her attendance unnecessary in Damien's eyes. But Ren managed to convince her brother that Elena's presence would be useful for organizing supply logistics during the multi-day gathering. Damien agreed reluctantly, more out of indifference than any genuine desire to include her, and Elena found herself standing at the edge of Hollow Ridge's grand meeting hall, observing the proceedings from a position of relative invisibility. It was there, among the crowd of alphas and their advisors, that Elena first came face to face with Cain Draven. She had heard of him before, of course. Everyone within the wolf community knew the name Cain Draven, alpha of the formidable Blackthorn Pack, a territory known for its strict discipline, its unmatched military strength, and its alpha's reputation for cold, calculated leadership that left little room for sentiment or weakness. Some called him ruthless, others called him fair, in the sense that his judgments, while harsh, were always consistent and never swayed by manipulation or favoritism. Elena had never expected to interact with him directly, given the significant difference in status between Ashwood and Blackthorn territories. Yet as she moved through the gathering hall, carrying a stack of documents related to trade negotiations that Damien had asked her to organize, she felt a distinct sense of being watched. Turning slightly, she found Cain Draven's dark eyes fixed on her from across the room, his expression unreadable, but undeniably intense. He stood taller than most of the wolves present, his presence commanding attention even in stillness, and something about his gaze made Elena feel as though he could see straight through the careful composure she had maintained for weeks. She quickly looked away, focusing on her task, but she could still feel his attention lingering, a strange weight that followed her movements around the room. It was not until later that evening, during a break between formal proceedings, that Cain approached her directly, his steps deliberate and unhurried as he crossed the room. "You are the former Luna of Ashwood," he said, his voice deep and measured, carrying none of the polite formalities that typically accompanied introductions among pack leaders. "Elena Voss." Elena straightened, surprised that he knew her name at all. "I am," she confirmed carefully, "though I am simply here to assist with logistics for this gathering, Alpha Draven." "Cain," he corrected, a slight tilt of his head accompanying the word. "I do not require formal titles from those I choose to speak with directly." Elena studied him for a moment, uncertain of his intentions. Alphas of powerful packs rarely sought out conversations with demoted former leaders of smaller territories, and she could not immediately discern what interest Cain might have in speaking with her. "Is there something I can help you with, Alpha Draven?" she asked, deliberately maintaining the formal address despite his correction. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth, as though her stubbornness amused him rather than offended him. "I have been observing the situation within Ashwood Pack with some interest," he said. "Your former mate's decision to strip you of your title in favor of a woman who cannot properly explain her own origins seems, to put it mildly, unusual." Elena's guard rose immediately. "I am not certain what you have heard, Alpha Draven, but I would prefer not to discuss pack matters that are not your concern." "Perhaps they are not my concern directly," Cain replied, his tone even, betraying no offense at her deflection. "But Blackthorn shares a border with territory, once controlled by the Thornwood Pack. Instability among neighboring packs tends to become everyone's concern eventually, particularly when that instability may be connected to remnants of a pack that once attempted to destabilize an entire region." Elena's breath caught slightly at the mention of Thornwood, though she quickly masked her reaction, keeping her expression as neutral as possible. "I am not certain what you are implying, Alpha Draven." "I imply nothing," Cain said simply. "I state facts, and I ask questions when facts do not add up." Your former mate's new Luna claims to be a human recently turned, yet several of my own sources who have encountered her during trade visits to Ashwood territory describe behavior far too controlled, far too calculated, for someone unfamiliar with pack politics. I find that inconsistency curious, Elena Voss. Do you? Elena hesitated, weighing the risks of engaging further with an alpha whose intentions remained unclear to her, against the possibility that he might genuinely share her suspicions about Priscilla's true nature. Something in his steady, unwavering gaze convinced her that Caindraven was not a man who wasted time on idle games or unnecessary manipulation. His reputation for directness, even if that directness came across as cold, suggested he would not have approached her without genuine purpose. I find it very curious, Elena admitted finally, lowering her voice despite the general noise of the gathering hall around them. More curious than I have been permitted to express within my own territory. Something shifted in Cain's expression, a flicker of genuine interest, replacing the cool detachment he had maintained throughout their conversation. Then perhaps we have more to discuss than logistics for this gathering, he said. Walk with me. Elena glanced around the hall, aware of the risk involved in being seen engaging in private conversation with an alpha as prominent as Caindraven, particularly given the current instability within her own pack. Yet the pull of curiosity, combined with the desperate need to find someone who might actually listen to her concerns without dismissing them outright, outweighed her caution. She followed him through a side corridor that led out to a quiet garden area behind the main gathering hall, away from the noise and crowded attention of the summit proceedings. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain, and for a moment, Elena allowed herself to simply breathe, grateful for the temporary escape from the tense atmosphere she had grown accustomed to within Ashwood. Tell me everything, Cain said once they were alone, his tone shifting from the formal coolness he displayed in public to something more direct, almost urgent. Everything you know, everything you suspect, regarding this woman who now wears your former pendant. Elena studied him carefully for a long moment, searching for any sign of deception or hidden motive, but found only steady, patient attention waiting for her response. She made a decision then, one that would set the course for everything that followed. She told him about Priscilla's inconsistent behavior, the whispers among pack members about her impossibly fast healing, the secret meetings near the eastern border with a man named Garrick, and the note Wren had discovered referencing a mysterious second phase of some larger plan. Cain listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly serious, as Elena laid out each piece of evidence she and Wren had gathered. When she finished, silence stretched between them for several long moments, filled only by the distant sound of the summit continuing inside the main hall. Garrick, Cain finally said, his voice low. I know that name. Elena's pulse quickened. You know him? He was one of the primary advisors to the former Thornwood Alpha, before the coalition drove them from their territory. Cain explained, his expression darkening. Reports after their downfall suggested he escaped capture, along with a small group of loyal followers, disappearing into unclaimed territories to the south. If he is indeed connected to the woman now claiming your former title, it confirms suspicions I have held for some time regarding attempts by Thornwood remnants to rebuild their influence. What could they possibly want with Ashwood specifically? Elena asked. Our territory is not particularly large or resource-rich compared to other packs in this region. Perhaps not, Cain agreed, but Ashwood's location provides strategic access to trade routes connecting several larger territories, including my own. If Thornwood remnants gained control of Ashwood, even indirectly through manipulation of its current alpha, they would gain significant leverage over regional trade and alliances. It is a clever strategy, using manipulation rather than open conflict, to seize what direct force could no longer achieve for them. The pieces began falling into place within Elena's mind, forming a clearer, more troubling picture than she had previously understood. Priscilla's presence within Ashwood was not simply about claiming a title or securing personal comfort. It was a calculated move within a much larger strategy, one that could destabilize an entire region if left unchecked. Damien will not listen to me, Elena said, frustration creeping into her voice despite her efforts to remain composed. He has already dismissed my concerns as jealousy, as bitterness over losing my position. I have no standing left within my own pack to challenge Priscilla's influence. Then we gather proof strong enough that dismissal becomes impossible, Kaine said, his tone carrying quiet determination. I have resources, trackers skilled at gathering information without detection, connections that extend into territories where Thornwood remnants might be hiding. If you are willing to work alongside me, Elena Voss, I believe we can uncover the truth needed to expose this scheme before it progresses any further. Elena studied him carefully, weighing the offer against the risks involved in partnering with an alpha from another territory, particularly one as powerful and closely watched as Cain Draven. Yet something in his steady, unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth, rather than simply believing convenient stories, resonated with her deeply after weeks of feeling isolated and dismissed within her own pack. Why does this matter to you? She asked finally. Beyond regional stability, beyond trade routes. Why would an alpha as powerful as yourself involve himself so directly in the internal matters of a smaller territory? Cain's expression shifted slightly, something more personal flickering behind his composed exterior. Because manipulation and deception disgust me, he said simply. Because I have watched too many good leaders fall victim to those who use fragility and false weakness as weapons, while true strength and loyalty go unrecognized and discarded. You do not strike me as someone who deserved the treatment you received within your own council hall, Elena Voss. The sincerity in his words caught her off guard, and for a moment, Elena found herself unable to respond, unused to receiving support so freely after weeks of isolation and doubt. Thank you, she managed finally. I do not know how to repay such generosity. Repayment is not necessary, Cain said. Simply help me uncover the truth. That will be more than enough. As their conversation drew to a close, and they made their way back toward the main gathering hall, careful to avoid drawing attention to their extended absence, Elena felt something shift within her, a spark of hope rekindling after weeks of feeling utterly alone in her fight against injustice. She still did not fully understand Cain Draven's motives, nor could she predict how their unlikely partnership might unfold in the difficult days ahead. But for the first time since the council meeting that had stripped her of everything she had built, Elena felt as though someone genuinely believed her, someone with the power and resources to help her uncover the truth, hidden beneath Priscilla's carefully constructed fragility. Neither of them noticed the pair of watchful eyes observing their private conversation from a distance, hidden among the shadows of the garden, reporting every word back to someone who would not be pleased to learn that their carefully laid plans had just encountered an unexpected and formidable obstacle. 2 days after the Hollow Ridge Summit concluded, Elena returned to Ashwood territory with a renewed sense of purpose, though she was careful to keep her interactions with Cain Draven hidden from anyone who might report back to Damien or Priscilla. She understood the delicate nature of their arrangement. If Priscilla suspected an outside alpha had begun investigating her true identity, she would likely accelerate whatever plan she and Garrick had been orchestrating, potentially putting the entire pack at greater risk. Cain, true to his word, wasted no time deploying his own trackers to investigate the situation more thoroughly. Within days, Elena received a coded message, delivered discreetly by one of Wren's trusted contacts. A small folded parchment, containing instructions for a meeting point along a quiet stretch of forest that bordered both Ashwood and neutral territory. Elena made her way there under the pretense of gathering herbs for the healing quarters, a task mundane enough not to raise suspicion given her diminished status within the pack. She found Cain waiting at the agreed location, accompanied by a wiry, sharp-eyed tracker named Finn, who carried a leather satchel filled with notes and sketches, documenting days of careful observation. My trackers have been watching the eastern border since the Hollow Ridge Summit, Cain explained without preamble, gesturing for Finn to share his findings. What we discovered confirms much of what you already suspected, and reveals troubling details you did not. Finn opened the satchel and produced several pieces of parchment covered in careful notes. The woman calling herself Priscilla has met with the man identified as Garrick on 4 separate occasions over the past week alone, he reported. Each meeting occurs at nightfall, always in the same secluded clearing, roughly 2 miles beyond Ashwood's eastern border. During the most recent meeting, we managed to get close enough to overhear portions of their conversation. What did you hear? Elena asked, leaning forward with anticipation. Garrick expressed concern about moving too quickly. Finn continued. He mentioned that rushing the timeline could expose their operation before what he called the second phase could be properly executed. The woman argued that Damien's trust in her had grown strong enough that delays were unnecessary, that she could convince him to make further changes to pack leadership within weeks rather than months. Elena's stomach tightened at the implications. Further changes to pack leadership, what does that mean exactly? Kane's expression darkened. It likely means removing anyone within Ashwood who might pose a threat to their control, replacing trusted advisors and warriors with individuals loyal to their cause instead. If this continues unchecked, Damien may find himself surrounded entirely by people answering to Garrick and whatever remains of Thornwood's leadership, while believing he still commands his own pack. The thought of Damien being so thoroughly manipulated, so completely isolated from genuine loyalty within his own territory, sent a chill through Elena, despite the anger she still harbored toward him for his treatment of her. Whatever their personal history, whatever pain he had caused her through his blind trust in Priscilla, she could not simply stand by and watch an entire pack fall victim to a scheme this calculated and dangerous. "We need more than overheard conversations," Elena said, forcing herself to focus on practical next steps, rather than the emotional weight of the situation. "Damien will not act on second-hand reports, especially not when they come through channels connected to me. We need something undeniable, something that cannot be dismissed as rumor or manipulation on our part." Finn nodded, producing another piece of parchment from his satchel. "There is something else. During our surveillance, we identified the location where Garrick has been staying, a hidden camp roughly 3 miles beyond the meeting clearing, well concealed within dense forest terrain. If Priscilla is indeed connected to Thornwood remnants, evidence within that camp could provide exactly the kind of proof needed to expose the entire scheme." Kane studied the map Finn had sketched, his expression thoughtful. Infiltrating the camp carries significant risk. If Garrick's followers discover an attempt to gather evidence against them, they may abandon the location entirely, taking whatever proof exists with them and potentially accelerating their timeline in response. "But if we succeed," Elena said, "we could have everything needed to expose Priscilla's true identity and her connection to Thornwood, undeniable evidence that even Damien cannot dismiss." Kane considered the risk carefully before nodding. "I will send a small team, experienced in covert operations, to investigate the camp under cover of darkness. It will need to happen soon, before Priscilla and Garrick's timeline accelerates further." As they finalized plans for the covert operation, Elena found herself grateful for Kane's methodical, careful approach to the situation. Unlike Damien, who had made a life-altering decision based on nothing more than tearful accusations and convenient timing, Kane insisted on verifying every piece of information, cross-referencing details, and minimizing unnecessary risk wherever possible. It was a stark contrast that Elena could not help but notice, and one that deepened the respect she had begun developing for him since their first conversation at Hollow Ridge. Over the following days, while Kane's trackers prepared for their infiltration of Garrick's hidden camp, Elena continued monitoring the situation within Ashwood itself, careful to maintain her outward appearance of quiet compliance with her diminished status. Priscilla, meanwhile, seemed entirely unaware that anyone had begun investigating her true origins, continuing her carefully performed fragility whenever Damien was present, while displaying flashes of sharp, calculated confidence during moments she believed went unwitnessed. During one particularly tense encounter, Elena found herself face-to-face with Priscilla in the pack's dining hall, a rare direct interaction that neither woman had actively sought but could not avoid given the confined space. Priscilla's expression shifted immediately upon noticing Elena, her posture straightening slightly before she caught herself, forcing her shoulders back into their usual delicate slump. "Elena," Priscilla said, her voice carrying its practiced softness, "I do hope you are adjusting well to your new duties. I know change can be difficult." The condescension in her tone was thinly veiled, and Elena forced herself to maintain composure despite the urge to respond with the sharp retort building in her chest. "I manage well enough," she replied evenly, "though I imagine your own adjustment to pack leadership must be quite demanding, given how recently you arrived among us." Something flickered behind Priscilla's eyes, a brief flash of calculation quickly hidden behind a fluttering, nervous smile. "It has been challenging," she admitted, though her tone suggested anything but genuine difficulty. But Damien has been so supportive. I could not have found my footing without him. I am sure his support has been invaluable, Elena said, unable to keep a slight edge from creeping into her voice, despite her efforts at neutrality. Tell me, Priscilla, where exactly did you say you came from, before arriving at Ashwood's borders? Priscilla's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, though she recovered quickly, her expression shifting into practiced sorrow. It is a painful memory, Elena. I would rather not revisit those difficult days if you do not mind. Of course, Elena said, though she made careful note of the deflection, another piece of evidence suggesting that Priscilla's story could not withstand direct scrutiny. I only ask because pack members have expressed curiosity. It seems only natural that we would want to understand more about the woman now leading us. Before Priscilla could respond further, Damien entered the dining hall, his attention immediately drawn to the tense exchange between the two women. His expression hardened as he crossed the room, positioning himself protectively beside Priscilla, despite her having shown no genuine signs of distress. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone carrying unmistakable warning. "No problem at all," Elena replied calmly, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. "Simply catching up with our new Luna. I will leave you both to your evening." She turned and walked away, feeling Damien's suspicious gaze following her every step until she exited the dining hall entirely. Once outside, she allowed herself a moment to breathe deeply, steadying the anger and frustration that threatened to overwhelm her careful composure. Every interaction with Priscilla confirmed further that the woman's fragility was nothing more than an elaborate performance, one that Damien remained utterly unable, or unwilling, to see through. That night, as Elena prepared for sleep within her small cottage, a soft knock sounded at her door. She opened it cautiously to find Finn standing outside, his expression grave despite the darkness that made his features difficult to fully discern. "The infiltration is complete," he said quietly, stepping inside once Elena gestured for him to enter. "What we found exceeds even our worst expectations." He produced a small leather-bound journal from within his cloak, handing it carefully to Elena. This belonged to Garrick. It documents their entire plan, dating back nearly 6 months, well before Priscilla ever arrived at Ashwood's borders. It confirms everything, Elena. Her arrival was never an accident. It was carefully orchestrated from the very beginning. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she opened the journal, scanning the careful, methodical notes, detailing a plan far more extensive and dangerous than she had initially imagined. Names of pack members marked for removal, timelines for consolidating control, references to a larger network of Thornwood remnants scattered across multiple territories, all working toward rebuilding the influence and power they had lost 2 years earlier. "This is everything we need," Elena breathed, her heart racing with a mixture of vindication and dread at the scope of what she now held in her hands. "This proves everything, Finn. Every suspicion, every whisper, every inconsistency. It is all documented here in Garrick's own handwriting." "Alpha Draven wanted you to know immediately," Finn said. "He believes the timeline has now become critical. If Priscilla and Garrick discover the camp has been compromised, they will likely accelerate their plans dramatically, potentially within days rather than weeks." Elena closed the journal carefully, tucking it securely within her cloak alongside the note Wren had discovered weeks earlier. The weight of the evidence she now carried felt immense, both literally and figuratively, representing weeks of careful investigation, unlikely alliances, and unwavering determination to uncover a truth that so many had refused to see. "Thank you, Finn," she said sincerely. "Please tell Alpha Draven that I am ready to move forward with whatever comes next." As Finn disappeared back into the darkness, Elena stood alone within her small cottage, staring down at the journal that held the power to change everything. She thought of Damien, still blinded by manipulation within his own lodge, unaware of the danger closing in around him and his entire pack. She thought of the pack members, who had watched her demotion in confused silence, too afraid to speak against a decision they instinctively knew was wrong. And she thought of Kaine Draven, an alpha from a rival territory who had believed her when no one else would, who had committed his own resources and reputation to help uncover a truth that threatened not just Ashwood, but the stability of the entire region. The evidence was gathered, The truth was undeniable. Now came the far more difficult task of ensuring that truth reached those who needed to hear it, before Priscilla and Garrick's dangerous plan could unfold any further. Despite holding evidence powerful enough to expose Priscilla's entire scheme, Elena understood that timing mattered as much as proof itself. Presenting the journal too hastily, without corroborating testimony or additional verification, risked giving Priscilla an opportunity to twist the narrative once again, painting the discovery as a fabrication designed by a bitter former Luna seeking revenge. Elena had witnessed firsthand how easily Damien could be swayed by carefully performed emotion, and she refused to give Priscilla any opening to manipulate the situation further. Instead, she and Kaine agreed to continue gathering supporting evidence, while carefully monitoring the pace of Priscilla and Garrick's activities, watching for any sign that their discovery of the compromised camp might accelerate the timeline of their plan. Meanwhile, life within Ashwood continued its uneasy rhythm, with Elena maintaining her diminished position within the storage sheds, while quietly observing every development within the pack. The isolation continued to weigh heavily on her, despite the renewed sense of purpose the investigation provided. Pack members who once sought her counsel now avoided eye contact entirely, fearful of associating with someone who had fallen so dramatically from Damien's favor. Even those who privately doubted Priscilla's story remained too cautious to voice their concerns openly, watching from the sidelines as Elena navigated her demotion with quiet dignity that many secretly admired, but few were willing to publicly support. One afternoon, while organizing newly arrived supplies within the storage sheds, Elena encountered a young pack member named Oliver, barely 18 years old, and still adjusting to the responsibilities of full pack membership. He approached her hesitantly, glancing around to ensure no one observed their interaction before speaking. "Elena," he said quietly, his voice carrying genuine respect that had grown rare in her interactions since the council meeting. "I wanted to thank you, properly, for training me during my first months here. I do not think I ever said it clearly enough." Elena paused her work, surprised by the unexpected kindness. "That is very thoughtful of you, Oliver. I hope your training has served you well." "It has," he confirmed, his expression earnest. "I do not believe what Priscilla said about you. I remember how patient you were with all of us, how fair you were, even when we made mistakes. I just wanted you to know that not everyone has forgotten." The simple sincerity in his words brought unexpected warmth to Elena's chest, a small reminder that her years of dedicated service had not been entirely erased from the memories of those she had helped shape. "Thank you, Oliver," she said softly. "That means more than you know." As Oliver returned to his own duties, Elena found herself reflecting on the strange nature of loyalty within pack politics. Fear could silence even those who genuinely believed in justice, yet beneath that silence, threads of quiet support remained, waiting for the right moment to surface. She wondered how many others within Ashwood harbored similar doubts about Priscilla's story, simply too afraid to voice them openly against Damien's unwavering trust in his new Luna. That evening, Wren arrived at Elena's cottage with troubling news that shattered the fragile sense of progress they had achieved. "Priscilla knows," Wren said breathlessly, having clearly run the distance from the main lodge to deliver the information as quickly as possible. "I overheard her speaking with Damien earlier. She claims someone has been investigating her, that she sensed unfamiliar wolves near the eastern border recently." Elena's stomach dropped. Did she mention Kaine directly, or the camp? "No specific names," Wren clarified, though her expression remained tense. "But she convinced Damien that the investigation proves external threats are targeting the pack, using her as a scapegoat to destabilize Ashwood's leadership. She has turned the discovery of Kaine's trackers into further evidence supporting her own victimhood." Elena closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the frustrating reality that even legitimate evidence gathering had somehow been twisted into further proof of Priscilla's manufactured persecution. "This is exactly what we feared," she said grimly. "She is far too skilled at manipulation, turning every obstacle into an opportunity to strengthen her position." "There is more," Wren continued, her voice growing quieter still. "Damien has ordered increased security around the pack borders, specifically watching for outside wolves. If Kaine's trackers attempt further surveillance, they risk direct confrontation with Ashwood warriors." The implications settled heavily over Elena. Their carefully constructed investigation now faced significant new obstacles, with increased security threatening to expose their partnership before they had gathered enough corroborating evidence to present a case Damien could not dismiss. Worse still, if direct confrontation occurred between Ashwood warriors and Blackthorn trackers, it risked escalating tensions between the two territories entirely, potentially undermining the very alliance Elena had worked so hard to build with Kane. "I need to contact him immediately," Elena said, already reaching for her cloak. "We need to adjust our approach before this situation spirals further out of control." She made her way carefully through the darkened forest toward the agreed meeting point near the border, moving with practiced stealth honed through years of leading border patrols during her time as Luna. She found Kane already waiting, his expression grave, suggesting he had already received similar news through his own network of informants. "You have heard," Elena said, more statement than question as she approached. Kane nodded. "Priscilla is more resourceful than even I anticipated. Turning surveillance into evidence of persecution is a sophisticated manipulation tactic, one that speaks to significant experience in political maneuvering." "What do we do now?" Elena asked, frustration evident in her voice, despite her efforts to remain composed. "Increased security makes further investigation far more dangerous, both for your trackers and for Ashwood's stability if confrontation occurs." Kane considered the situation carefully, his expression thoughtful despite the tension of the moment. "We already possess Garrick's journal, containing detailed documentation of their entire scheme. Perhaps continued covert investigation is no longer necessary. Perhaps it is time to consider a different approach entirely." "What kind of approach?" Elena asked. "A more direct confrontation," Kane replied. "Rather than continuing to gather evidence in secret, risking discovery and escalating tensions, we present what we already have directly to Damien, in a setting where he cannot easily dismiss it, or allow Priscilla to twist the narrative further." Elena considered the suggestion carefully, weighing the risks against the potential benefits. Presenting evidence directly carried significant danger, particularly if Damien's trust in Priscilla remained strong enough to dismiss even documented proof as fabrication. Yet continuing to gather evidence covertly, given increased security and Priscilla's growing suspicion, risked even greater danger, both to Kane's trackers and to the timeline of Priscilla and Garrick's larger plan. "If we move too soon, without absolute certainty that Damien will accept the evidence, we risk losing everything," Elena said carefully. "Priscilla is skilled enough at manipulation that even Garrick's journal might be dismissed as a forgery, especially if presented without additional corroboration. Then we need corroboration strong enough to eliminate any possibility of dismissal," Kane said. "Testimony, perhaps, from someone directly involved in Garrick's operation. Someone who can confirm the journal's authenticity beyond any reasonable doubt." Elena's mind raced through the possibilities. The man Wren saw meeting Priscilla near the border, Garrick himself. If we could somehow capture him, force a confession that Damien could witness directly, it would eliminate any room for Priscilla to twist the narrative. "A dangerous undertaking," Kane acknowledged, "but not impossible, particularly if executed carefully. My trackers have already identified Garrick's movement patterns. With proper planning, we could arrange to intercept him during one of his meetings with Priscilla, catching them both in the act of coordinating their scheme." The plan carried significant risk, Elena understood, but it also offered the strongest possible path toward finally exposing the truth in a manner that Damien could not dismiss or Priscilla could not manipulate. Catching them together, forcing confirmation of their scheme directly in front of witnesses, would provide undeniable proof that no amount of manufactured tears or fragile performances could overcome. "We need to move quickly," Elena said, determination hardening her resolve. "Before Priscilla's suspicion grows strong enough that she abandons her meetings with Garrick entirely, taking whatever remains of their plan further underground." Kane nodded in agreement. "I will coordinate with my trackers immediately, finalizing details for the operation. We will need precise timing and careful execution to ensure success without unnecessary risk." As they finalized the initial framework for their plan, Elena felt the weight of the coming confrontation settling over her, a mixture of determination and apprehension building within her chest. Everything she had worked toward since the council meeting that stripped her of her title, now hinged on the success of this final, decisive action. Failure would not simply mean continued personal humiliation. It would mean allowing Thornwood remnants to potentially seize control of Ashwood entirely, endangering every wolf within her former pack. She thought of Damien, still blind to the manipulation surrounding him, still trusting a woman whose entire existence within Ashwood had been carefully orchestrated deception. Despite everything he had done, despite the pain and betrayal she had experienced at his hands, Elena found herself hoping that when the truth finally emerged, he would find the strength to see it clearly, to protect the pack he had sworn to lead, even if that meant confronting the devastating reality of how thoroughly he had been deceived. The path forward remained uncertain, filled with risk, and the very real possibility of failure. But for the first time since her humiliating demotion, Elena felt something resembling hope taking root within her chest, strengthened by the unlikely alliance she had formed with an alpha who valued truth over convenience, evidence over emotion, and justice over the comfortable fiction that had nearly cost an entire pack its stability and safety. The days following the decision to intercept Garrick during one of his meetings with Priscilla passed with agonizing slowness, each hour stretching Elena's nerves thinner as she waited for Kane's trackers to identify the precise timing of the next scheduled encounter. In the meantime, life within Ashwood grew increasingly tense, with Damien's newly implemented security measures creating an atmosphere of suspicion that seemed to affect every corner of the pack. Warriors patrolled the borders with heightened vigilance, questioning anyone who approached the territory's edges, while Priscilla used the increased security as further opportunity to position herself as a victim requiring protection. She rarely left Damien's side during this period, clinging to his arm with practiced fragility whenever other pack members were present, weaving elaborate stories about feeling watched, feeling threatened by unseen forces determined to undermine her rightful place within the pack. Elena watched this performance with growing frustration, forced to maintain her composed exterior even as she witnessed Priscilla's manipulation growing bolder with each passing day. The most difficult moments came during pack gatherings, where Priscilla would occasionally direct pointed comments toward Elena, subtle enough to avoid outright accusation, but sharp enough to remind everyone present of the demotion that had befallen their former Luna. During one such gathering, held to discuss preparations for the approaching autumn harvest, Priscilla made a comment that struck particularly close to the danger Elena and Kane's investigation now faced. "I do hope everyone remains vigilant," Priscilla said, her voice carrying its usual delicate softness while her eyes flickered briefly toward Elena. "Outside forces seem determined to create instability within our pack. We must all remain loyal to Damien's leadership, resisting any attempts to sow doubt or division among us." The words carried clear warning, a message directed specifically at Elena, despite being framed as general counsel to the pack. Elena forced herself to maintain a neutral expression, though internally she recognized the growing danger of their situation. Priscilla's suspicion had clearly deepened beyond simple awareness of surveillance, evolving into active efforts to preemptively discredit anyone who might challenge her position. After the gathering concluded, Elena found Ren waiting nearby, her expression grave. "She is getting more careful," Ren observed quietly, as they walked together toward the edge of the training grounds. "I do not think she meets with Garrick as openly as before. I have not been able to track her movements the past 2 nights." This news, combined with the increased security measures throughout the pack, suggested that their window of opportunity for intercepting Garrick might be closing rapidly. Elena made her way to the meeting point with Kane that evening, her sense of urgency growing with each step through the darkened forest. "My trackers report similar difficulty," Kane confirmed when Elena shared Ren's observations. "Garrick's movements have become erratic, suggesting he suspects his usual meeting patterns have been compromised. This complicates our plan considerably." Finn, standing nearby, produced a fresh set of notes from his satchel. "There is one consistency remaining," he said. "Despite altering his general movements, Garrick continues visiting a specific location roughly once every 3 days, always under cover of complete darkness. We believe this location serves as a secure drop point for messages and supplies, given its careful concealment and the brief duration of his visits. If we intercept him there, during one of these scheduled visits, we may still have opportunity to force the confrontation we need," Kane said, studying the map Finn provided. though timing will need to be precise, and we cannot guarantee Priscilla's presence during such an interception. Elena considered this complication carefully. Even without catching them together directly, capturing Garrick alone with sufficient evidence and forcing testimony regarding his connection to Priscilla and their shared plan could still provide the corroboration we need. A reasonable alternative, Kane agreed, though it carries its own risks. Garrick will likely resist providing information voluntarily, and forcing confession through more aggressive means risks accusations of coercion that Priscilla could use to discredit whatever testimony we obtain. The challenge of gathering evidence that could withstand scrutiny while avoiding methods that might themselves become grounds for dismissal weighed heavily on their planning. Elena found herself grateful, once again, for Kane's methodical approach, his insistence on considering every angle before committing to action, a stark contrast to the impulsive, emotion-driven decisions that had characterized Damien's recent leadership. Over the following 2 days, Kane's trackers monitored the identified drop point with careful patience, documenting Garrick's patterns while avoiding any action that might alert him to their surveillance. Elena, meanwhile, continued her careful observation within Ashwood itself, noting with growing concern that Priscilla's behavior had shifted noticeably, her performances of fragility becoming more frequent and more elaborate, as though she sensed the walls closing in around her scheme and sought to solidify her position through increasingly desperate displays of vulnerability. During a particularly tense moment, Elena witnessed Priscilla staging what appeared to be a fainting spell during evening council proceedings, collapsing dramatically just as discussions turned toward border security concerns. Damien rushed to her side immediately, abandoning the meeting entirely to attend to her, while pack elders exchanged uncertain glances, clearly uncomfortable with how frequently such incidents seemed to occur whenever difficult topics arose. Elena caught Corwin's eye across the room, the elderly healer who had shared crucial information about Priscilla's suspiciously fast healing weeks earlier. His expression carried quiet skepticism, though he said nothing as he moved to assist with the apparent medical emergency, playing along with the performance while clearly harboring his own private doubts. That evening, as the pack settled into uneasy rest following the disrupted council meeting, Elena received word from Wren that the moment they had been waiting for had finally arrived. Kane's trackers report Garrick approaching the drop point tonight, Wren whispered urgently, having received the message through their established network of discreet communication. This may be our best opportunity yet, given how distracted the pack remains following Priscilla's collapse. Elena moved quickly, making her way through the darkened forest, toward the location Kane's trackers had identified, her heart pounding with anticipation and no small amount of apprehension. She found Kane and Finn already positioned nearby, along with 2 additional Blackthorn warriors, providing additional support for the operation. He should arrive within the hour, Kane said quietly, as Elena joined them in their concealed position, overlooking the drop point, a small clearing marked by a distinctive fallen tree that served as an easily identifiable landmark. We will wait until he is alone and fully engaged with retrieving whatever message or supplies await him, minimizing any opportunity for escape or resistance. The tension of waiting stretched Elena's nerves taut as the minutes passed in near silence, broken only by the natural sounds of the forest settling into nighttime rhythms. Finally, movement appeared at the edge of the clearing, a figure moving with careful, practiced stealth toward the fallen tree that marked the drop point. Elena recognized him immediately as the stranger she had first glimpsed near the tree line weeks earlier, the same watchful presence that had disappeared into the forest before she could learn his identity. Garrick moved with confidence, clearly believing his careful precautions had successfully concealed his activities from any potential observers. He knelt beside the fallen tree, reaching into a hidden compartment within its hollowed trunk, and it was in this moment of distraction that Kane gave the signal for their carefully planned intervention to begin. The Blackthorn warriors moved with practiced coordination, emerging from the surrounding trees to surround Garrick before he could react to their presence. He startled at the sudden movement, instinctively reaching for a blade concealed within his cloak, but froze the moment he recognized the number and strength of those now blocking every avenue of escape. Kane stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention, even in the darkness of the forest clearing. "Garrick," he said, his voice carrying quiet authority, that left no room for misunderstanding the seriousness of the situation. Former advisor to the Thornwood Pack, now working to rebuild influence, you lost 2 years ago, through manipulation and deception. We know everything. Garrick's expression shifted rapidly from initial shock to calculated assessment, his eyes flickering between the warriors surrounding him as he searched for any possible opening to escape or negotiate his way out of the confrontation. I do not know what you are talking about, he said, though his voice carried none of the confidence necessary to make the denial believable. Elena stepped forward then, holding up the leather-bound journal that Finn had recovered from the hidden camp weeks earlier. This says otherwise, she said firmly. Your own handwriting, documenting months of careful planning, timelines for consolidating control within Ashwood, and detailed notes regarding Priscilla's role in manipulating our Alpha's trust. Deny it if you wish, but the evidence speaks clearly enough on its own. Garrick's eyes widened slightly upon seeing the journal, confirming beyond any doubt that the documentation Finn had recovered was indeed authentic. His careful composure cracked, replaced momentarily by genuine alarm before he attempted to reassert control over his expression. You do not understand the forces you are dealing with, he said, his voice lowering with something that sounded almost like warning. This goes far beyond one pack, one territory. If you interfere, you risk consequences you cannot possibly anticipate. Then explain those consequences to us clearly, Kaine said, unmoved by the attempted intimidation. You have 2 options before you, Garrick. Cooperate fully, providing complete testimony regarding your plan and Priscilla's role within it, or face justice through whatever means the packs affected by your scheme deem appropriate. Given the severity of manipulation and deception involved, I imagine the consequences of continued resistance would prove far more unpleasant than cooperation. For several long moments, Garrick remained silent, clearly weighing his limited options against the overwhelming evidence and force arrayed against him. Finally, his shoulders sagged slightly, the fight draining from his posture as he recognized the futility of continued denial. What do you want to know? He asked, resignation evident in his tone. Over the following hour, under careful questioning from both Kaine and Elena, Garrick provided a detailed account of the scheme that confirmed and expanded upon everything they had already suspected. Priscilla, whose true name he revealed as Ilsa Marrow, had indeed been a trusted lieutenant within Thornwood's leadership before their downfall 2 years earlier. Rather than scattering entirely after their defeat, a core group of loyal followers, including Garrick and Ilsa, had spent the intervening years carefully planning their return to power, targeting smaller, strategically positioned territories that could be infiltrated through manipulation rather than direct confrontation. Ashwood had been selected specifically due to its valuable trade route access and Damien's reputation for occasionally impulsive decision-making, traits their intelligence gathering suggested would make him particularly susceptible to emotional manipulation. Ilsa's arrival, her collapse near the northern border, her carefully constructed story of escaping a cruel pack, all of it had been meticulously planned and rehearsed months before she ever set foot within Ashwood's territory. The plan required patience, Garrick explained, his earlier resistance giving way to something approaching resigned cooperation. Ilsa spent weeks earning Damien's trust, positioning herself carefully before making any move against Elena's position as Luna. Once she secured that position, the plan called for gradually replacing key advisors and warriors within the pack, consolidating control until Ashwood existed as little more than a puppet territory, serving Thornwood's larger goals of rebuilding regional influence. And the ultimate goal? Elena asked, though she suspected she already understood the answer. Eventual expansion, Garrick confirmed, using Ashwood as a foothold to gradually extend influence over neighboring territories, rebuilding the power and control Thornwood lost when the coalition drove us from our original territory. It would have taken years, careful patience, but the foundation was solid, until the 2 of you began interfering. Elena absorbed this confirmation with a mixture of vindication and horror. The full scope of the danger Ashwood had faced finally laid bare before her. Everything she had suspected, everything she had fought to uncover despite isolation and dismissal, proved not just accurate, but even more dangerous than she had initially understood. We need this testimony recorded formally, Kaine said, turning to Finn. Written confession, signed and witnessed. along with the journal as physical evidence. This must be presented to Damien in a manner that leaves absolutely no room for doubt or dismissal. As Finn began the process of documenting Garrick's confession in formal written form, Elena found herself studying the man who had orchestrated so much suffering and manipulation, curious despite everything about what had driven him toward such calculated deception. "Do you regret any of this?" she asked quietly. "The manipulation, the deception, the damage caused to an entire pack, built on trust and loyalty?" Garrick's expression remained carefully neutral, though something flickered briefly behind his eyes that might have been genuine reflection. "Regret is a luxury for those who can afford to consider consequences before acting," he said finally. "We lost everything 2 years ago. Territory, status, the respect we had spent generations building. When you have nothing left to lose, questions of regret become far less relevant than questions of survival and rebuilding what was taken from you." Elena considered his response, understanding on some level the desperation that could drive individuals toward such extreme measures, even as she rejected entirely the methods he and Ilsa had chosen to pursue their goals. "There were other paths available to you," she said. "Paths that did not require destroying an entire pack's trust and stability to rebuild your own fortunes." "Perhaps," Garrick acknowledged, though his tone suggested he did not entirely believe this himself. "But desperation rarely allows for careful consideration of alternative paths. We saw an opportunity, and we took it. That the opportunity has now failed does not change the circumstances that led us toward this choice in the first place." As Finn completed documenting the formal confession, ensuring Garrick's signature, and the testimony of witnessing warriors properly recorded the entire exchange, Kane turned to address the practical matter of what would happen next. "You will be held within Blackthorn territory until this situation with Ashwood is fully resolved," he said to Garrick. "Your continued cooperation, should further testimony be required, will factor into how leniently your case is ultimately handled by the broader Pack Council." Garrick nodded, resignation fully settling over his features now that the confrontation had concluded. As the Blackthorn warriors moved to secure him for transport back to their territory, Elena felt the weight of everything they had accomplished settling over her, a complex mixture of relief, vindication, and lingering apprehension about what remained ahead. They now possessed everything needed to expose Ilsa's true identity and the full scope of Thornwood's scheme, undeniable evidence that Damien could not reasonably dismiss regardless of whatever manipulation Ilsa might attempt in response. But confronting Damien directly, forcing him to acknowledge the extent of his own blindness and the danger he had unknowingly exposed his entire pack to, remained a daunting challenge that would test everything Elena had worked to achieve since her humiliating demotion weeks earlier. "We should move quickly," Kine said, as if reading the concern evident in her expression, "before Ilsa realizes Garrick has been compromised and attempts to flee or accelerate whatever remains of their timeline. Tomorrow, we present this evidence to Damien directly, in front of witnesses who cannot be dismissed or intimidated into silence." Elena nodded, steeling herself for the confrontation that lay ahead. "Tomorrow, then, it is time Ashwood finally learns the truth." As they made their way back toward the border separating Ashwood and Blackthorn territories, Elena carried with her not just the physical evidence of Garrick's journal and formal confession, but a renewed sense of determination that had grown steadily since that first devastating council meeting. She had lost her title, her authority, and the trust of a mate who had once stood beside her as an equal. But through careful investigation, unexpected alliance, and unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth, she had found something perhaps even more valuable. Undeniable proof that would finally force an entire pack to confront the deception that had nearly cost them everything. Word of Garrick's disappearance reached Ilsa faster than Elena and Kane had anticipated. By the time morning light broke over Ashwood territory, whispers had already begun circulating among the pack that something unusual had occurred near the eastern border overnight, though no one yet understood the true significance of what had transpired. Elena returned to her cottage in the early hours before dawn, exhausted but resolute, only to find Wren waiting anxiously at her doorstep. "Ilsa knows something happened," Wren said urgently, her voice tight with concern. "She has been agitated all morning, pressing Damien to increase security even further, claiming she senses growing danger surrounding the pack. I think she suspects Garrick has been compromised." Elena's exhaustion gave way to renewed alertness at this news. Then we cannot afford further delay. If she senses the walls closing in, she may attempt something desperate before we have the opportunity to present our evidence properly. As if confirming Wren's warning, urgent activity erupted throughout the pack grounds within the hour. Elena watched from a distance as Ilsa moved through the main lodge with uncharacteristic purpose, her usual delicate demeanor replaced by sharp, decisive movements, as she conferred urgently with Damien in the privacy of his study. Whatever she was saying clearly troubled him deeply, his expression growing increasingly grave as their conversation continued. By midday, word spread through the pack that Damien intended to call an emergency council meeting, though the stated purpose remained deliberately vague. Elena's instincts told her that Ilsa had likely convinced him that some external threat justified drastic action, perhaps even the formal exile she had been pushing toward since claiming the Luna title weeks earlier. She made her way quickly to the border meeting point, finding Kane already alerted to the developing situation through his own network of informants within Ashwood territory. "She is accelerating faster than we anticipated," Kane said grimly as Elena arrived, breathless from the urgent pace of her journey. "My sources suggest Damien plans to formally announce your exile from Ashwood territory during this emergency council meeting, using unspecified external threats as justification." The news struck Elena like a physical blow, though she forced herself to remain focused, despite the fear threatening to overwhelm her careful composure. Exile would mean permanent separation from the pack she had dedicated her life to protecting, stripped not just of her title, but of any connection to the territory and people she had sacrificed so much for over the years. "We cannot allow this to proceed," Elena said, her voice steady despite the turmoil churning beneath her composed exterior. "If Damien signs an exile decree before we present our evidence, reversing that decision becomes exponentially more difficult, regardless of what proof we eventually provide." Kane's expression hardened with determination. "Then we move immediately. I will bring the full evidence, along with sufficient warriors to ensure our presence at this council meeting cannot be dismissed or blocked. Ashwood will hear the truth today, whether Ilsa Marrow wishes it or not." As they prepared to move, Finn approached with additional urgent information. "Alpha Draven, my scouts report that the council meeting has been moved earlier than initially planned, set to begin within the hour. If we intend to arrive before any exile decree is finalized, we must depart immediately." The urgency of their situation crystallized into decisive action. Kane quickly assembled a contingent of his most trusted warriors, along with Finn carrying the formal documentation of Garrick's confession and the recovered journal, while Elena steadied herself for the confrontation that would finally determine the fate of everything she had worked toward since her devastating demotion. Their journey to Ashwood's main lodge felt simultaneously too fast and impossibly slow, adrenaline and apprehension warring within Elena's chest as they crossed the border into territory that had once been entirely her own. She noted the surprised, uncertain expressions of Ashwood warriors as they observed a significant contingent of Blackthorn wolves entering their territory, though Kane's authoritative presence and clear lack of aggressive intent prevented any immediate confrontation. They arrived at the main lodge just as the emergency council meeting was beginning, pack members and elders already gathered within the great hall, their expressions tense with uncertainty about the purpose of this unusual gathering. Damien stood at the head of the hall, Ilsa positioned beside him, wearing an expression of carefully performed distress, when the doors burst open to reveal Elena standing alongside Alpha Kane Draven and his assembled warriors. Shocked murmurs rippled through the hall at this unexpected arrival, pack members exchanging bewildered glances as they attempted to understand the significance of an alpha from a neighboring territory arriving unannounced during what was meant to be an internal Ashwood matter. Damien's expression shifted rapidly from confusion to barely contained anger as he registered Elena's presence alongside a rival alpha. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" Damien demanded, his voice carrying across the stunned silence of the hall. "This is an internal matter, Kane. Your presence here, uninvited, borders on serious violation of territorial respect between our packs." Kane stepped forward, entirely unfazed by Damien's obvious displeasure. "I apologize for the unexpected nature of our arrival," he said, his tone measured, despite the tension crackling through the room. But what I bring today concerns not just internal Ashwood matters, but the safety and stability of this entire region. I believe once you understand what we have discovered, you will recognize the urgency that justifies this intrusion. Ilsa's composure flickered visibly at Kane's words, her eyes darting briefly toward Elena, before she forced her expression back into practiced fragility. "Damien," she said softly, moving closer to him as though seeking protection, "I do not understand what is happening. Why would Alpha Draven involve himself in matters that do not concern him?" "That is precisely what we intend to explain," Elena said, stepping forward despite the weight of countless eyes now fixed upon her. "Damien, what I am about to share will be difficult to hear, but I ask that you listen fully before making any further decisions regarding this council meeting." Damien's jaw tightened, clearly torn between his authority as Alpha and the undeniable gravity radiating from both Elena and Kane's demeanor. "Speak then," he said finally, though his tone remained guarded. "But know that whatever accusations you bring will require substantial proof, given the circumstances of your recent removal from leadership." "Substantial proof is exactly what we have brought," Kane said, nodding toward Finn, who stepped forward carrying the leather satchel containing Garrick's journal and formal confession. "Damien, the woman standing beside you, the woman you have named Luna of Ashwood Pack, is not who she claims to be. Her true name is Ilsa Marrow, former lieutenant within the Thornwood Pack's leadership before their downfall 2 years ago." Gasps erupted throughout the hall, Pack members turning to stare at Ilsa with dawning shock and suspicion. Ilsa's carefully constructed composure finally began to crack, genuine fear flashing across her features before she attempted to recover her practiced fragility. "This is absurd," she said, her voice rising with what sounded like genuine panic beneath the performance. "Damien, they are lying, trying to manipulate you into distrusting me. This is exactly the kind of external threat I warned you about." "Is it, Ilsa?" Elena asked, her voice cutting through the chaos with steady authority. "Or should I say, is it Garrick you should be worried about, given that he has already confessed everything?" The color drained from Ilsa's face at the mention of Garrick's name, her carefully maintained mask finally slipping entirely to reveal something far colder and more calculating beneath. Damien's gaze shifted between Elena and Ilsa, confusion and dawning horror beginning to replace his earlier certainty. "What is she talking about?" he asked Ilsa directly, his voice carrying a dangerous edge that suggested his unwavering trust had finally begun to waver. "Damien, please," Ilsa said, her voice cracking with what might have been genuine desperation, now that her careful performance had begun crumbling under the weight of undeniable exposure. "You must not listen to them. I love you. Everything I have told you has been the truth." "Has it?" Kane asked, his voice carrying quiet authority that commanded the attention of every wolf within the hall. "Because we have a signed, witnessed confession from Garrick, your former colleague within Thornwood's leadership, detailing an elaborate scheme to infiltrate Ashwood, manipulate its alpha, and gradually seize control for the purpose of rebuilding Thornwood's lost influence across this region." Finn stepped forward, presenting the journal and formal documentation directly to Damien, who took the materials with trembling hands, his eyes scanning the pages with growing horror as the full scope of the deception he had fallen victim to became undeniably clear. The hall fell into stunned silence as Pack members watched their alpha's expression shift from confusion to devastating realization. "This cannot be true," Damien murmured, though his voice carried none of its earlier certainty. He looked up at Ilsa, whose composure had entirely collapsed now, her expression contorting between desperate pleading and something colder, more calculating, as she recognized the futility of continuing her performance. "Damien," she said, her voice suddenly losing much of its practiced softness, "you would have never given me anything if I had approached you honestly. This was the only way to secure the position I deserved." The admission, however unintentional, sealed her fate entirely within the hall, confirming beyond any remaining doubt the truth of everything Elena and Kane had presented. Damien stared at the woman he had trusted so completely, who had cost him his mate's authority and nearly delivered his entire pack into the hands of enemies determined to destroy everything Ashwood had built, and something within him seemed to fracture entirely under the weight of his own catastrophic misjudgment. "Guards," Damien said finally, his voice hollow with devastation, Secure her immediately. She is not to leave this hall until we determine appropriate consequences for what she has done. As Ashwood warriors moved to restrain Ilsa, her final composed mask shattering entirely into furious, desperate protest, Elena stood witnessing the collapse of a scheme that had nearly destroyed everything she had spent years building. The truth had finally emerged, undeniable and complete, but the cost of reaching this moment, the pain of betrayal and isolation she had endured throughout the process, remained a weight she would carry long after the immediate crisis had passed. The great hall remained in stunned disorder for several long minutes following Ilsa's restraint, pack members whispering urgently among themselves as they attempted to process the magnitude of the deception that had nearly overtaken their entire territory. Damien stood motionless near the center of the room, the journal still clutched in his trembling hands, his expression carrying the hollow weight of a man confronting the complete unraveling of decisions he had believed were justified. Elena watched him carefully, uncertain what to expect as the reality of his catastrophic misjudgment settled fully upon him. Part of her still carried the sting of his betrayal, the humiliation of watching him strip her of everything she had built based on nothing more than manufactured tears and calculated manipulation. Yet another part of her, the part that had spent 5 years genuinely caring for this pack, and the mate she had once trusted completely, felt something closer to sorrow, watching him confront such devastating truth. "Elena," Damien said finally, his voice carrying none of the cold authority he had displayed during the council meeting weeks earlier. "I do not know how to begin addressing what I have done. The evidence you and Alpha Draven have presented is undeniable. I was manipulated so thoroughly that I failed to recognize deception happening directly within my own lodge, and in doing so, I nearly destroyed everything this pack has built, along with the trust and respect you rightfully earned through years of dedicated service." The pack elders, who had remained largely silent throughout the dramatic revelations, began murmuring among themselves with growing urgency. One elder, a respected warrior named Percival who had served Ashwood for decades, stepped forward with grave expression. "Alpha Damien, this failure extends beyond simple misjudgment. You allowed personal feelings to override the careful leadership this pack depends upon, dismissing legitimate concerns and stripping a proven leader of her position, based on unverified accusations, from someone whose true identity you never bothered to properly investigate." Damien absorbed this criticism without argument, his posture reflecting genuine acknowledgement of the failure Percival described. "You are right," he said quietly. "I allowed myself to be deceived, and in doing so, I betrayed not just Elena, but the trust this entire pack placed in my judgment as Alpha." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled pack members, the accumulated weeks of quiet doubt and suppressed concern finally finding voice now that the truth had been undeniably exposed. Elena watched as pack members who had avoided her gaze for weeks now looked toward her with expressions of renewed respect, some carrying visible guilt for their earlier silence during her demotion. "What happens now?" asked another elder, directing the question toward Damien, though her gaze flickered uncertainly toward Kane and Elena as well. Before Damien could respond, Kane spoke with measured authority. "Ilsa Marrow and her associate Garrick must face formal judgment for their actions, not just against Ashwood, but against the broader stability of this region. Given the scope of their scheme and its connection to Thornwood remnants, I believe this matter warrants attention from the wider Pack Council, ensuring appropriate consequences that prevent similar attempts against other territories in the future." Damien nodded slowly, though something in his expression suggested deeper turmoil beneath his agreement with Kane's assessment. "That seems appropriate," he said, "but there remains the matter of Elena's position within this pack, a decision that falls squarely upon my own judgment, given the harm my choices have caused." He turned to face Elena directly, his expression carrying genuine remorse that seemed to reach beyond mere political necessity. "Elena, I cannot adequately express the depth of my regret for how thoroughly I failed you. You deserve far more than a simple apology, though I offer it sincerely nonetheless. I would understand entirely if you no longer wish to hold any position within this pack, given everything you have endured." The hall fell silent as pack members awaited Elena's response, the weight of the moment settling heavily over the gathered crowd. Elena considered her words carefully, aware that whatever she said next would shape not just her own future, but the trajectory of an entire pack still reeling from the exposure of deception that had nearly cost them everything. "Damien," she said finally, her voice carrying steady composure, despite the complex emotions churning within her, "the harm caused by your decisions extends far beyond simply stripping me of a title. It extends to every pack member who watched a proven leader dismissed without proper investigation, to every warrior who feared speaking against injustice due to fear of your displeasure. Restoring my position alone will not repair the deeper damage done to this pack's trust in fair, consistent leadership." Damien's expression tightened with the weight of this truth, though he did not attempt to argue or deflect from the validity of her assessment. "What would you have me do then?" he asked. "I recognize that simple restoration cannot undo the harm already caused." Elena glanced briefly toward Kane, whose steady presence beside her had provided crucial support throughout the difficult weeks of investigation and confrontation, before returning her attention to Damien and the assembled pack. "I believe Ashwood requires more than my restoration to its previous state," she said carefully. "It requires genuine reflection on how leadership decisions are made, ensuring that emotional manipulation cannot so easily override careful judgment and establish trust in the future." Percival, along with several other elders, nodded in agreement with this assessment, clearly recognizing the deeper structural concerns that Ilsa's manipulation had exposed within Ashwood's governance. "Perhaps," Percival suggested carefully, "this situation calls for broader council involvement in significant leadership decisions moving forward, rather than allowing such choices to rest entirely upon the Alpha's judgment alone, however well-intentioned." Damien considered this suggestion with visible humility, a marked contrast to the unwavering authority he had displayed during the council meeting that had originally stripped Elena of her position. "I would welcome such changes," he said, "if they help prevent similar failures in the future, ensuring this pack's leadership remains accountable to more than just my own judgment." As the difficult conversation continued, addressing the practical matters of restoring proper governance and determining appropriate consequences for Ilsa and Garrick's actions, Elena found her attention drawn repeatedly toward Kane, whose quiet strength and unwavering commitment to truth had carried her through the most difficult weeks of her life. Whatever emerged from this moment of reckoning within Ashwood, she recognized that the partnership they had built through shared determination to expose injustice had fundamentally changed her understanding of what genuine leadership and trust could look like. Later that evening, after the council meeting concluded with formal decisions to convene a broader regional council regarding Ilsa and Garrick's fate, and after Ashwood's elders began the difficult process of establishing new governance structures to prevent similar manipulation in the future, Elena found herself standing alone in the quiet garden behind the main lodge, finally allowing herself a moment to process everything that had transpired. Kane found her there, his approach quiet and respectful of the reflective silence she had sought. "You handled everything today with remarkable composure," he said, settling beside her without intruding upon her space. "Many would have sought more immediate vindication, more direct consequences for the pain caused against them. Vindication feels less important than ensuring this does not happen again," Elena replied, her gaze fixed on the distant tree line where moonlight filtered through swaying branches. "To Ashwood, or to any other pack that might fall victim to similar manipulation." Kane studied her for a long moment, something thoughtful and warm, replacing the usual careful neutrality of his expression. "Your priorities reflect exactly the kind of leadership this region desperately needs," he said. "Strength tempered with genuine wisdom, rather than mere ambition or desire for personal vindication." Elena turned to face him fully, appreciating the sincerity evident in his words. "I could not have uncovered any of this truth without your help, Kane. Your willingness to believe me, to commit your own resources and reputation toward investigating concerns that everyone else within my own pack dismissed, means more than I can properly express." "You earned that belief through your own composure and integrity," Kane replied. "I simply provided resources. The strength and determination required to pursue truth despite isolation and dismissal came entirely from within yourself." As their conversation continued beneath the quiet moonlight, Elena felt something shifting within her, a recognition that the painful journey through betrayal and vindication had led her toward an unexpected connection, built on mutual respect and shared commitment to justice. rather than the convenient fiction and emotional manipulation that had characterized her relationship with Damien in its final, troubled months. Whatever remained ahead, whether within Ashwood's reformed governance or in whatever role she might eventually choose for herself, Elena recognized that the strength she had discovered within herself throughout this ordeal, combined with the genuine partnership she had found with Kane, offered a foundation far more solid than any title or position could provide on its own. News of Ilsa Marrow's true identity and the scope of Thornwood's scheme spread quickly beyond Ashwood's borders, reaching the wider regional pack council within days of the dramatic revelations at the emergency meeting. Representatives from several territories, including those who had participated in the original coalition that drove Thornwood from their lands 2 years earlier, gathered at a formal hearing to determine appropriate consequences for Ilsa and Garrick's actions. Elena attended this hearing alongside Kane, providing testimony regarding the evidence they had gathered and the methodical investigation that had ultimately exposed the truth. Garrick, true to his earlier cooperation, provided additional testimony that helped identify several other Thornwood remnants who had been quietly working to infiltrate other territories using similar manipulation tactics, allowing the wider pack council to address the broader threat before it could cause further damage across the region. Ilsa, by contrast, remained defiant throughout the proceedings, her earlier desperate pleading giving way to cold resentment once the futility of continued denial became fully apparent. The council ultimately decided upon permanent exile for both Ilsa and Garrick, banished from all territories within the regional alliance, their names formally marked as threats to be reported should they attempt to resurface within any allied pack's lands in the future. Within Ashwood itself, the weeks following the dramatic exposure of Ilsa's deception brought significant change to the pack's governance structure. True to the commitments made during that fateful council meeting, Damien worked alongside the pack elders to establish new protocols requiring broader consultation before major leadership decisions, particularly those involving the removal or appointment of significant pack positions. This reformed structure aimed to prevent any single individual, however well-intentioned, from being manipulated into decisions that could destabilize the entire pack. Damien himself underwent a period of visible reflection and humility, his earlier confident authority tempered by genuine recognition of how thoroughly his judgment had been compromised. He approached Elena privately several times during this period, offering sincere apologies and attempting to understand how he had allowed himself to become so completely deceived despite years of partnership and trust between them. "I do not expect you to forgive me easily," he told her, during one such conversation, held quietly within his study weeks after the crisis had concluded. "What I did to you, the humiliation and isolation you endured because of my failures, cannot simply be erased through apology alone." Elena considered his words carefully, recognizing the genuine remorse evident in his expression, even as she acknowledged the lasting impact his decisions had caused.
"Forgiveness will take time, Damien," she said honestly.
"But I do not hold the kind of resentment that seeks to punish you further beyond what you have already experienced through this ordeal. We built something meaningful together over the years, even if it ultimately proved vulnerable to manipulation neither of us anticipated." Their conversation, while not erasing the pain of what had transpired, provided a measure of closure that allowed both of them to move forward, no longer as mates bound by the traditional bond that had once connected them, but as former partners who had learned difficult lessons about trust, judgment, and the importance of listening carefully to those who had earned genuine loyalty through years of dedicated service. Elena ultimately chose not to reclaim her former position as Luna of Ashwood, despite the pack's willingness to restore her title following the reformed governance structure that emerged from the crisis. Instead, she spent several weeks helping guide the transition toward more balanced leadership, training a new generation of advisors and warriors who would help ensure the pack's stability moving forward, before making the decision that would ultimately reshape her future entirely. During this transitional period, her relationship with Kane continued to deepen, built upon the foundation of mutual respect and genuine partnership they had discovered throughout their shared investigation into Ilsa's deception. Kane made frequent visits to Ashwood during the following weeks, ostensibly to assist with the reformed governance structure and ongoing coordination regarding Thornwood remnants. though both of them understood the visits carried significance beyond mere political necessity. "I have been giving serious thought to your future," Kane said during one such visit, as they walked together through the same garden where they had first found quiet connection following the dramatic council meeting. "Blackthorn territory could benefit tremendously from someone with your skills, your careful judgment, and proven ability to build genuine trust and loyalty among those you lead." Elena considered this offer carefully, recognizing the significance of what Kane was proposing. "Are you suggesting a formal position within your pack?" she asked, though something in his tone suggested his meaning extended beyond simple professional partnership. "I am suggesting a partnership," Kane clarified, his usual measured composure giving way to something more genuine and vulnerable than she had witnessed from him previously. "Not simply as an advisor or warrior within my territory, but as an equal, someone whose judgment and strength I have come to value beyond simple professional respect. Elena, these past weeks working alongside you have shown me qualities of leadership and character I have rarely encountered, certainly never in someone I found myself drawn toward on a more personal level as well." The sincerity in his words, combined with the genuine warmth that had grown between them throughout their shared pursuit of truth and justice, settled something within Elena that had remained unsettled since the devastating council meeting weeks earlier. She thought of everything she had endured, the humiliation and isolation, the painful betrayal that had nearly cost her everything she had built over 5 years of dedicated service. Yet through that painful journey, she had discovered not just the strength to fight for truth, despite overwhelming odds, but also an unexpected connection built on genuine respect, rather than convenient fiction. "I would be honored to consider such a partnership," she said finally, allowing herself to feel the full weight of hope and possibility that Kane's offer represented. "Though I would want to ensure my departure from Ashwood does not leave the pack vulnerable during this crucial period of transition." "Of course," Kane agreed readily. "There is no urgency beyond what feels right for you, Elena. I simply wanted you to understand the possibility exists, whenever you feel ready to consider it fully." Over the following month, Elena worked diligently to ensure Ashwood's reformed governance structure remained stable, training capable successors who could continue guiding the pack through its recovery from the crisis that had nearly destroyed everything they had built. Damien, humbled by his experience and genuinely committed to preventing similar failures in the future, proved an attentive student of the collaborative leadership approach the pack elders had established, gradually rebuilding trust with pack members who had witnessed his catastrophic misjudgment weeks earlier. Finally, once Elena felt confident that Ashwood's stability no longer depended upon her direct involvement, she made the decision to formally accept Kane's offer, transitioning toward a new role within Blackthorn territory that recognized her proven abilities as both a leader and a strategic partner. The pack members who had once feared associating with her during her demotion now gathered to bid her farewell with genuine warmth and gratitude, recognizing fully the sacrifices she had made and the courage she had displayed throughout the difficult weeks of investigation and confrontation. Ren, who had risked significant personal danger throughout their investigation, embraced Elena warmly during her final day within Ashwood territory. "You saved this pack," Ren said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just from Ilsa's scheme, but from the deeper failures in judgment that might have destroyed us eventually, regardless of her involvement. Ashwood owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid." "You saved this pack as much as I did," Elena replied warmly, embracing the woman who had become a trusted friend and ally throughout the difficult ordeal. "Your courage in speaking up, even when fear kept others silent, made all the difference in uncovering the truth in time." As Elena made her final journey from Ashwood toward Blackthorn territory, accompanied by Kane and his warriors who had come to escort her toward her new life, she found herself reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment. She had lost her title, her authority, and her trust in a mate she had once believed would stand beside her through anything. Yet through that devastating loss, she had discovered reserves of strength and determination she had not fully recognized within herself, forged unexpected alliances built on genuine respect rather than convenient fiction, and ultimately found a partnership that honored her true worth rather than diminishing it for the sake of fragile deception. Within Blackthorn territory, Elena settled into her new role with the same dedication and careful judgment that had defined her years of service within Ashwood, quickly earning the respect and trust of warriors and advisors who recognized her proven abilities and unwavering commitment to fair, thoughtful leadership. Her partnership with Kane deepened steadily, built upon a foundation far more solid than any title or ceremonial bond could provide, rooted instead in mutual respect, shared values, and the genuine trust they had built together through their shared pursuit of truth against overwhelming odds. Months later, as Elena stood beside Kane during a formal gathering, welcoming representatives from allied territories, including a notably humbled delegation from Ashwood, led by Damien himself, she found herself struck by how completely her circumstances had transformed since that devastating council meeting that had once stripped her of everything she believed defined her worth. She had learned, through painful experience, that true strength was never dependent upon a title bestowed by others, but rather on the unwavering commitment to truth, integrity, and justice that guided one's actions, even when facing isolation and dismissal. Kane caught her eye across the gathering hall, offering a small, genuine smile that carried none of the calculated coldness others often attributed to him, but instead reflected the deep partnership and mutual respect they had built together. Elena smiled in return, grateful beyond measure for the unexpected path that had led her from devastating betrayal toward a future built on authentic strength, genuine partnership, and the profound satisfaction of knowing that truth, however difficult to uncover, would always eventually prevail against even the most carefully constructed deception. The Alpha, who had once taken everything from her, had ultimately been humbled by his own catastrophic misjudgment, while the Alpha, who had simply needed evidence, who had trusted her word and committed himself to uncovering the truth alongside her, had helped her discover a strength and partnership far more valuable than any title she had lost. In the end, Elena understood that her greatest victory had never been about reclaiming what was taken from her, but about proving, through unwavering integrity and courage, exactly what genuine strength and leadership truly looked like.